Part 97. After the flash marriage, the character collapsed. Author, Dowby in the World. Chapter 961. Chapter 961 Mom. It's a small world too. After chasing for a while, he ran half a circle around the outer wall of the castle and reached the back garden of the castle. In a resting place in the back garden, a beautiful woman was holding a classic book in her hands and reading it seriously. The direction Cupid ran was towards the gentle and beautiful woman. Jianyuman saw her back from a distance and didn't feel anything was wrong at first. Cupid ran to the woman and barked at her twice. The dog became even more excited. When the woman heard Cupid's cry, she turned around and looked at the puppy barking around her feet. Her eyes became very soft, and she knelt down and hugged her small body. Cupid, why are you here? I see you are out of breath running. I only have black tea here and nothing else to eat. The woman hugged the dog affectionately and gently stroked Cupid's head with one hand. Cupid stayed in the woman's arms unusually obediently, which made Jianyuman, who was chasing after her from a distance, very jealous. She thought the was playing with her, but she didn't expect that it was coming to find someone else. Normally, strangers would give him some food, and his tail would be wagging more happily than anyone else. He has a good relationship with Xianying, as if they were master and servant. Now he has abandoned his master, whom he has not seen for a month, and ran to find someone else. People. Can Jianyuman not be sad and jealous? He ran over quickly and angrily. Her footsteps, when the woman holding Cupid turned towards her and saw the woman's face clearly, Jianyuman was dumbfounded. Chiubo's eyebrows, small cherry mouth, have the facial features similar to Jianyuman. The two of them stood together, just like sisters, but Jianyuman lacked the gentleness and tranquility accumulated over the years. Mom, Jianyuman couldn't help but shout out. During the 5 years she lived in San Francisco, Country M, she and her mother took care of the dog together. Her mother even took the dog out for walks more often. She mostly played with the dog and took care of Cupid, half of which was taken by my mother. Seeing the scene of Cupid lying docilely in the woman's arms and being gently touched by the woman, it was like going back to those years when I lived in San Francisco. The beautiful woman in front of her is her mother, who has been missing for many years. The scene of one person and one dog being intimate is exactly the same as the scene in the mind of mother and Cupid getting along. Mom, Jianyuman shouted again happily and ran towards the beautiful woman quickly. Hearing someone calling her mother, the woman raised her head and looked up, and saw a somewhat familiar young woman whom she had met several times. Her eyes were shining, and she ran towards her with a look of surprise on her face, and she kept calling her. Holding Mom. The woman frowned slightly, as if she understood something, and the expression on her face became gentler. Miss Jian regards me as your mother again. Li Ning gently responded to Jianyuman's call while stroking Cupid. Jianyuman was so surprised that the moment Li Ning opened her mouth, it was like a basin of cold water being poured from head to toe. She also completely realized that the person holding Cupid was not her mother, because her mother could not call her Miss Jian, she would only be gentle. Call her Manman, and she won't look at him with eyes that are a little strange. Ms. Li Ning, Jianyuman asked uncertainly. It's me. Li Ning smiled softly, and her hands continued to caress Cupid gently. Cupid, the dog, had closed its eyes comfortably, enjoying Li Ning's caress, without even looking at its real owner. End of this chapter. After the flash marriage, the character collapsed. Author, Dowby in the World. Chapter 962. Chapter 962 Mom. It's a small world 3. It's me. Li Ning smiled softly, her hands still caressing Cupid gently. Cupid, the dog, had closed its eyes comfortably, enjoying Li Ning's caress without even looking at its real owner. It's really Li Ning. After confirming that the person in front of her was Li Ning, deep disappointment appeared in her expression and face, and her life changed from vibrant joy to lifeless sadness. Miss Jian, don't be sad. I know your mother's whereabouts are still unknown, and you are anxious to find her. If she knows that there is a good daughter like you, anxiously looking for her, she will be very happy. Don't be discouraged, either. Destiny will always arrange for you mother and daughter to meet again. Li Ning comforted her gently, using the same face as Qian Xianers to comfort her, which made Qian Yuman feel dazed for a while. It was like her mother was comforting Qian Yuman, and she felt exactly the same that they would meet each other one day. This scene really made people confused for a while. Thank you for your comfort. It would be great if you were really my mother who has been missing for many years. Qian Yuman's mood is still a little low. With his eyes closed, Cupid, who was enjoying Li Ning's caress, opened his eyes, screamed crazily towards Qian Yuman, and then turned towards Qian Yuman, as if to express an important message. Qian Yuman, who didn't understand dog language at all, was already feeling a little depressed, but her puppy actually roared at her, which made her instantly angry. Okay. You is barking so happily at your master, let's see if I don't hit you. Qian Yuman made fists with both hands, pretending to hit it. Cupid, who was in Li Ning's arms, immediately twisted his little body and jumped out of her arms, still shouting desperately at them. Li Ning was slightly surprised when she heard Qian Yuman said that she was Cupid's master. So Cupid is your dog? Yes, he has been following me since he was as big as a palm. Cupid is very good and brings me a lot of joy during this time. Yes, yes. Although Cupid can be mean sometimes, he is indeed very, Has it brought you a lot of joy during this period? Qian Yuman suddenly realized something. Cupid and Li Ning are very familiar and very close. Appearance. I also thought that I was in Xianying's territory now, and Li Ning appeared in Xianying's home, and that her son was called Xianyuanxuan. A bunch of complicated relationships were instantly sorted out. The four of them are a family. Oh my god. Isn't Xianying a Western guy? Is this world that small? As if God was anxious to prove what Qian Yuman thought, a cry rang out. Mom, I brought you some pastries. A magnetic deep voice sounded from behind Qian Yuman. Qian Yuman turned around and saw Xianyuanxuan, holding a plate of pastries, walking slowly towards them. Come on, Xianying is jumping up and down behind Xianyuanxuan. Brother, give me a piece to eat first. Xianying smiled and reached out to take a few pieces of cake from Xianyuanxuan's plate, and stuffed them all into his mouth without hesitation. This made Qian Yuman couldn't help but sigh again. The world is so small, and all the people she knows are gathered together. The woman who looks like her mother is Xianying's mother, and the son who looks like her mother is Xianying's brother. The world is so small. Xianyuanxun naturally saw Qian Yuman and smiled and nodded towards him gentlemanly. End of this chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. After the flash marriage, the character collapsed. Author, Daobi in the World. Chapter 963. Chapter 963 Wedding Invitation 1. Xianyuanxun naturally saw Qian Yuman and smiled and nodded towards him gentlemanly. Xianying, who was walking beside Xianyuanxun, bumped Xianyuanxun with his arm and smiled mysteriously. Brother, have you seen the beauty next to mommy? Does she look upright? Does she have particularly good eyesight? It's pretty good, and she looks a lot like mom. Do you have an Oedipus complex? Xianyuanxun teased with a smile. Xianying was stunned for a moment. After being reminded by Xianyuanxun, he realized that Qian Yuman and Li Ning were very similar. He couldn't help but scream when he discovered this. Oh my god. They look alike. What's going on? I don't know, but the woman you like doesn't recognize her mother when she sees her, as if her mother has been missing for many years. Xian Yuanxun's eyes flickered slightly, with a bit of thinking. Hey. I seem to remember that Xiao Qian has been looking for her mother for many years. Her mother was taken away in the hospital for no apparent reason. Xian Yingzhi buried his head in thought and described in a few words Qian Yuman's search for her mother in the past few years. After hearing this, Xian Yuanxun's eyes changed slightly, and the way he looked at Qian Yuman was also slightly different from before. Qian Yuman saw Xian Yingzhi approaching, walked quickly to him, punched him in the chest, and glanced at Xian Yuanxun. Little Yingzhi, why have I never heard you say that you have such a handsome brother? When Qian Yuman met this time, she couldn't help but take a closer look at Xian Yuanxun. Li Ning's son Xian Yuanxun was really handsome. He looked like Prince Charming from a TV series. He was even more handsome than the male stars in those TV series. With a touch of nobility that they don't have. She looks very similar to Li Ning and has a temperament like Li Ning, but with more masculinity. He is also a rare handsome guy, and he gives her a kind feeling, and she can't help but want to get close to him. Ha! Didn't I tell you? Ha ha ha! But Xiao Qian, I am very handsome, but you don't want to miss him, Xian Yingzhi said solemnly. Qian Yuman smiled mysteriously, approached Xian Yingzhi and whispered at a volume that only the two of them could hear. What are you doing? With such a handsome brother, why shouldn't people care about him? As the saying goes, wealth should not go to outsiders. It is convenient for others to become your sister-in-law. Why don't you let me take it? Qian Yuman was joking, but actually he had no evil thoughts towards Xian Yuanxun, but only pure appreciation. In particular, he and she are somewhat similar, standing together more like brothers and sisters. Moreover, his mother and her mother looked exactly the same, so she unconsciously regarded each other as brothers and sisters. If she really had a love affair with Xian Yuanxun, she would have a feeling. Qian Yuman's joke made Xian Yingzhi unhappy. He protested desperately and even screamed. Qian Yuman took Xian Yingzhi a few steps further, a little farther away from Li Ning and her son, and lowered her voice slightly to ask. Yingzhi, why haven't I heard that your mother looks exactly the same as mine? You don't know that when I met her recently, I couldn't help but call her mom several times. Qian Yuman's eyes were always on her, talking and laughing with her son. Li Ning's body. It's so similar, every move and even the tone of voice is exactly the same as my mother's. Hey, didn't I tell you? Xian Yingzhi tilted his head and said innocently. That's right. I never told you, and I don't know that your mother and my mother look exactly the same. End of this chapter. After the flash marriage, the character collapsed. Author, Daobi in the World. Chapter 964. Chapter 964 Wedding Invitation 2. Qian Yuman almost spat out a mouthful of old blood. This kid has never seen her mother's photo. Qian Yuman felt like she was asking the sky without saying anything. They had known each other for so long, but he had never seen them before. Looking back on the past carefully, it seemed that she had never shown Xian Yingzhi a picture of her mother once. He didn't know and was not surprised. But, Yingzhi, you call Aunt Li Ning mother, but you look like a pure Western young man without any foreign blood. Why do you call her mother? And I have also met your father. All three of them have Asian faces. Why did you have a blonde hair and blue eyes? A genetic mutation. This mutation is too exaggerated, as if it has changed into a different species. Even if Xian Yingzhi nodded and said that he was their biological son, she would not believe it. Xian Yingzhi smiled with his teeth exposed and touched his face. Have I ever told you that I am an adopted son of my family? Of course my parents are not my biological parents, and I don't even know about my biological parents. Qian Yuman almost stared out of her eyes. Listen to what she heard today. Xian Yingzhi is an adopted son. She didn't know Xian Yingzhi carefully before. After understanding at this moment, she knew that she had a lot of one-sided understanding of Xian Yingzhi. I only know his name, birthday, workplace, and friends he has. I don't know anything about his family members or his life background. Today I learned a lot at once. I know that his family is very rich. I know that he has an older brother and is an adopted son of the Xian family. Qian Yuman tried hard to calm down her excitement. She needed to slowly digest Xian Yingzhi's words. But, Xian Yingzhi looked at Xian Yuanxuan, who was talking and laughing with Li Ning, with a glint of envy in his eyes. She also really wanted to talk and laugh with her mother. Although she knew that the person in front of her was not her mother, she still felt empty in her heart and envied the immortal hero. Li Ning, who was talking and laughing with her son, received several looks from Qian Yuman. Son, I don't know why, but every time I see the way Miss Jian looks at me, I always feel depressed. Li Ning touched her chest, where she occasionally felt depressed. Seeing the disappointment and sadness in Jian Yuman's eyes, I couldn't control myself several times and wanted to hold her in my arms to comfort her. Perhaps it's because she looks a bit like you. However, judging from her appearance, I believe she is my daughter. Looking at Jian Yuman, her eyes softened a bit. Sister, Xian Yuanxun also looked at Jian Yuman. Finding that Xian Yuanxun and his son were looking at her, Jian Yuman smiled brightly at them and waved. They didn't talk for long, and it was almost lunchtime. The four of them walked towards the castle while chatting. Tang Yuj, who went to put away the ingredients, was looking for Jian Yuman when Li Ning walked towards him and startled him. Mother-in-law. Aunt Xian'er, Tang Yuj couldn't help but exclaimed, and then his eyes fell on Xian Yingzhi and Xian Yuanxuan. He quickly flashed a few questions, and after organization, he understood a few questions. An intriguing smile appeared on Tang Yuj's lips. He seemed to have discovered something interesting. Tang Yuj walked towards them gracefully, with a devilish smile on his lips, and walked towards them slowly. Xian Yuanxuan, who was talking to Xian Yingzhi, saw Tang Yuj appear at home and immediately greeted him with a smile. What's the wind blowing today? Mr. Tang actually came to my humble home. End of this chapter. After the flash marriage, the character collapsed. Author, Daobi in the World. Chapter 965. Chapter 965 Wedding Invitation 3. What's the wind blowing today? Mr. Tang actually came to the humble house. Xian Yuanxun was still a little surprised, because it was 4 or 5 years ago since Tang Yuj last visited the Xian family. Today, he didn't receive any news at all. The person appeared in front of him. Ms. Qian Yuman on the side. After hearing Xian Yuanxun's unpretentious humility, she started a crazy barrage mode in her heart. Humble house? He had the nerve to say that this was a humble house. If this was a humble house, her home would be in a slum, under a bridge. The total value of their castle is probably more than the sum of all her father's assets. Is he trying another way to show off his wealth? I wonder if there are millions of poor people in this world who can't bear his excitement. Looking at Xian Yuanxun's humble appearance, it is obvious that he has no idea what children from poor families think. Forget it, comparing people to each other will make people angry. Faced with Xian Yuanxun's teasing words, Tang Yuj laughed loudly and reached out to pat Xian Yuanxun's shoulder. I'm going to eat with my old, ex-wife. Before Tang Yuj's wife could say the word mother-in-law, she saw Qian Yuman glaring at her, and the conversation immediately changed to that of her ex-wife. Ex-wife, Xian Yuanxun raised his eyebrows, with a trace of confusion in his eyes. Ex-wife? Who is Tang Yuj's ex-wife? Why didn't he see? Xian Yuanxun's eyes fell on Qian Yuman. There was only one young lady here, Qian Yuman. His eyes turned to Xian Yingzhi's cute little face, and he seemed to understand something in an instant. It turns out that Miss Jian and Mr. Tang were husband and wife before. That was before Qian Yuman stated the important point solemnly. Yes, yes. We are not husband and wife now, but we can't decide the future. Tang Yuj looked at Jian Yuman meaningfully, and then raised his eyebrows at Xian Yingzhi. Boy, do you hear that? Even if Jian Yuman has divorced me and we are no longer husband and wife, it does not mean that we will not be husband and wife in the future. Xian Yingzhi immediately glared back. What's so great? The past tense is the past tense. What are you dragging? You are just a cousin. I didn't want you back then. Why can't I pick you up and use it again? The two men glared at each other as if there was no one around, making the scene very awkward for a time. Jian Yuman twitched her lips in embarrassment at Xian Yingxun and the others. She didn't expect that the scene would become so embarrassing, so she asked why Tang Yuj wanted to follow. She didn't even tell Xian Yingzhi in advance. Ha ha ha. Little Yingzhi, it's almost noon, please take me to the kitchen quickly. Jian Yuman laughed awkwardly and walked forward quickly. As he left, he abducted Xian Yingzhi, who was angry with Tang Yuj. As soon as Tang Yuj heard this, he immediately chased after him. Jian, let me help you. Xian Yingzhi immediately protested. Mr. Tang, there's no need for that. Although you are an uninvited guest, I can't let you help with the cooking as a guest. You'd better go find me and reminisce about old times. I won't trouble you anymore. Don't be so polite, don't treat me as polite, we are already familiar with each other. A shameless man, being tough means that they are familiar with each other. Xian Yingzhi felt hesitant in his heart. They are not familiar with each other, okay. Where is it, ripe? He wanted to drive him away now. We are also guests, so I really don't need to trouble you. No trouble, no trouble, if there is one more person to help, it will be completed faster. End of this chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. After the flash marriage, the character collapsed. Author, Daobi in the World. Chapter 966. Chapter 966 Wedding Invitation 4. The two men were like two quarreling flies, constantly buzzing in Jian Yuman's ears, and her head was about to explode. The next scene was even more bizarre. Two men were competing to wash the vegetables. One piece of cabbage was shattered into pieces. This completely angered Jian Yuman. Kick both men out, she doesn't need their help, she should cook alone. Although the two men who were driven away wanted to continue, seeing Jian Yuman's stinky face, they finally left obediently and stopped causing trouble, otherwise neither of them might end up with nothing to eat. Finally quiet, Jian Yuman devoted himself to cooking. In this new century, there are so many foodies. The dishes made by Jian Yuman are full of flavor, and some dishes are comparable to many top chefs. Xian Yuanxun, who smelled the fragrance from afar, came over after smelling the smell. I didn't expect Miss Jian's cooking skills to be so good. No wonder my little brother has been asking you to come over and cook. Xian Yuanxun admired from the bottom of his heart. He happened to see a dish coming out of the oven, picked up a piece of sweet and sour pork ribs with his chopsticks and stuffed it in the mouth. Oh. It's so hot. The freshly baked sweet and sour pork ribs were stuffed into the mouth, completely ignoring the temperature it should have. While enjoying the delicious food, I also suffered the pain caused by it, and because it was so delicious, I couldn't part with it. Vomiting it out made Xian Yuanxun feel like he was about to die. Jian Yuman saw Xian Yuanxun's greedy appearance and couldn't help but cover her mouth and enjoy herself. She didn't expect that Xian Yuanxun, who existed like Prince Charming, could be so approachable. But it's really like my mother. Every time she knows it's very hot, she still can't help but want to eat it. The result is just like Xian Yuanxun now, shouting that it's hot while trying to eat it. Spit out the bones of the ribs. Xian Yuanxun straightened his back, shook his head naturally, and restored his image of a graceful Prince Charming. Xian Yuanxun coughed awkwardly. Don't mind, It's just that I smelled the aroma of the ribs you made upstairs, and I was so greedy that I didn't have time to worry about the image. Qian Yuman smiled and shook his head. It's okay. Wait for a while and you can try again. I made a lot of food today. Every time Qian Yuman makes sweet and sour pork ribs, he must prepare 4 to 5 kilograms of ribs. Less than 4 kilograms will definitely cause public dissatisfaction. Who knows that this is Qian Yuman's best specialty, and it is also an exclusive secret recipe. There is only one store here, so it is difficult to taste the same thing outside. Qian Yuman used to be proud that she would definitely make a fortune by opening a restaurant that only sold sweet and sour pork ribs. Do you need my help? Looking at Qian Yuman's busy figure, Xian Yuanxun asked casually, waiting for Qian Yuman to reject him and then leave. Just the handsome guy from Xian, he didn't expect that Qian Yuman was not polite to him at all, but actually stuffed 2 pieces of potatoes into his hand and pointed at a row of knives. Pick yourself a knife. Then he was busy chopping and washing vegetables without looking at the handsome guy. Xian Yuanxun stared at the potatoes and Qian Yuman in his hands, frowning in distress. Peel potatoes. He had never even peeled an apple, let alone this potato that was a little misshapen. But I had already stopped talking, and it seemed that I had no choice but to sit down. The handsome guy Xianda looked at the 2 pieces of potatoes in his hand with distress, looked at the row of knives, and finally picked a kitchen knife and worked seriously. It's done, all peeled. End of this chapter. After the flash marriage, the character collapsed. Author, Daobi in the World. Chapter 967. Chapter 967 Wedding Invitation 5. Qian Yuman, who had finished another dish, heard Xian Yuanxun's joyful voice coming from behind. It's done, all peeled. And it feels very good, there is no residual skin at all. It's done, although it's very slow, it's still done. Qian Yuman didn't even look back and spread his hands to ask for potatoes. Xian Yuanxun put the potatoes in Qian Yuman's hands and showed a relieved smile. After Qian Yuman received the potatoes, he frowned slightly and turned his head in confusion. Why are potatoes so light? When her eyes fell on the 2 pieces of potatoes in her hands, her eyes almost popped out of her head. She looked at the too many potatoes on her palms in disbelief. How many were they? There is still room for 2 potatoes in the palm of the hand. The potato that was originally as big as a palm has become the size of an egg and has shrunk several times. The 2 potatoes are not half as big as the original one. The corner of Qian Yuman's mouth twitched uncontrollably, and she slowly raised her head to look at the Prince Charming Xian Yuanxun with a faint smile. As expected, His Highness the Prince, who has never touched the skin with his fingers, can't even peel potatoes. His ability to peel potatoes is simply amazing, making people marvel at his ability to remove skins and flesh. Qian Yuman smiled brightly and thanked her. Thank you. Then his face changed very quickly, and it turned from sunny to cloudy immediately. You can go now. Driving Xian Yuanxun away, it turned out that the kitchen was only suitable for her to work alone. She couldn't help but praise herself for buying an extra potato when she bought it today. Xian Yuanxun touched his nose and left dejectedly. He knew that his tall image was destroyed in her heart at this moment, and he was afraid that only dregs would be left. The dark spots in life, the dark spots in life. Xian Yuanxun sighed sadly in his heart. He needed to find someone to comfort his young heart. Everyone in the Xian family seemed to be full of curiosity about the kitchen today, and everyone came over to help. Not long after Xian Yuanxun left, Li Ning walked slowly towards the kitchen with a gentle smile on her face. Miss Qian, do you need my help? Qian Yuman raised her head and looked at the face that was exactly the same as her mother's. She felt a surge of joy in her heart. Then she thought of the 3 grown men who had to help before. Then she looked at Li Ning's jade hands that were obviously not touched by Yang Chunsui and shook her head quickly. No need to trouble you, I can do it myself. Although I can't cook, I can wash vegetables. Li Ning leaned over with a smile and took the crucian carp that was actually being washed from Qian Yuman's hand. Qian Yuman was no longer polite, because judging from the way Li Ning washed the fish, it was obvious that this was not the first time. I recall that when I lived with my mother, who couldn't cook, tried very hard to make a home-cooked meal, but she almost burned down the kitchen. Then Qian Yuman took over the task of cooking. Even though she had not learned it systematically, the tomato scrambled eggs she made for the first time was very delicious. From then on, she discovered her cooking skills. Qian's mother felt ashamed that she had let her daughter take care of herself instead. She would help Qian Yuman wash and chop vegetables every time. 5 years later, Qian Yuman's third-level skill in washing and cutting is still the same. Miss Qian, do you think it's okay to wash it like this? Qian Yuman took a look at the fish she washed. It was good enough. Auntie, you can call me Manman. Calling me Miss Qian is too polite and you call me Miss Qian. This unfamiliar name will make her sad. If she calls herself Manman, she can pretend that the woman beside her helping to wash vegetables is her missing mother. End of this chapter. After the flash marriage, the character collapsed. Author, Dalby in the World. Chapter 968. Chapter 968 Wedding Invitation 6. If she calls herself Manman, she can pretend that the woman beside her helping to wash vegetables is her missing mother. Then I'll call you Manman. Li Ning smiled softly, put the fish in her hand on the plate, handed it to Qian Yuman, and asked her to handle the fish next. Two women of different ages cooperated with each other quietly without much communication. In the end, Qian Yuman spent an hour making 6 dishes and 1 soup, including chicken, duck, and fish. Qian Yuman's good craftsmanship was naturally praised by everyone, and Xian Yingzhi began to sweep across the battlefield without any image, which made the follower Tang Yuj dissatisfied, especially when eating the last piece of ribs. The two almost quarreled, and finally Qian Yuman he stretched out his chopsticks to intercept them and stop the war from happening. Qian Yuman is very pleased to feel everyone's love for her craftsmanship. At the end of the meal, everyone began to praise her to each other. Handsome guy Xian said, "It is a man's blessing to have a virtuous woman like Manman as his wife." Then he looked at his younger brother and gave him an encouraging look. After receiving the encouraging look from his brother, Xian Yingzhi was instantly confident. Tang Yuj, yes, I am indeed very happy. Tang Yuj moved his face shamelessly. Then the dining table went to the ground, and Qian Yuman immediately hit him and kicked him hard. Tang Yuj shrank his feet painfully and looked at Qian Yuman sadly, pretending to be pitiful towards her. Seeing Tang Yuj's deflated look, Xian Yingzhi smiled happily. Ha ha ha, does Mr. Tang regret it? It's too late to regret it. Xian Yingzhi stuffed a bunch of food into his mouth and said happily. Xiao Qian, I don't mind at all if you come over and cook for me every day in the future. I don't mind at all if I wash the dishes and you cook. Mr. Tang also joined in and threatened Xian Yingzhi not to make any unnecessary efforts. Are you three treating Manman as a cook? Li Ning couldn't help but laugh when faced with the competition among the younger generation. Qian Yuman sighed deeply, shook his head helplessly and said with a smile. Yes. I feel like I have become their kitchen wife, pestering me to cook for them every day. As long as there is a chance, they will get together to grab food, as if they have been hungry for several years. The food they grabbed tasted particularly delicious, and this was somehow true for a few of them. I didn't. Tang Yuj and Xian Yingzhi stated their positions in unison. When they saw the enemy, they also stated their positions. Then they glared at each other and told the other party not to act rashly. Qian Yuman looked at Li Ning helplessly and saw how childish the two men were, even trying to this away. Li Ning understood, and her eyes smiled more gently. They don't need to clear the table after dinner, only the servants do it. Qian Yuman came here today just to visit Xian Yingzhi's house, and didn't plan to stay too long. She still had work to do in the afternoon. After staying at Xianjia for half an hour, and seeing that the time was almost up, Qian Yuman said goodbye to everyone and left. When the time came to prove his ability, Xian Yingzhi walked actively beside Qian Yuman. "Xiao Qian, I'll take you to work." "No need, I happened to be on my way." A certain giant baby who had eaten a lot of vinegar today intervened in their communication and refused them the opportunity to be alone. Xian Yingzhi pouted his mouth, snorted dissatisfiedly at Tang Yuj, and then said to Qian Yuman with a happy smile. End of this chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. After the flash marriage, the character collapsed. Author, Daobi in the World. Chapter 969. Chapter 969 Wedding Invitation 7. Xian Yingzhi pouted his mouth, snorted dissatisfiedly at Tang Yuj, and then said to Qian Yuman with a happy smile. "I know how to get to the embassy, and I don't even need to turn on the navigation system." "Yingzhi, don't bother, just send it here." "Yes, yes. As long as I, the flower protector, am here, I won't bother you." Tang Yuj interrupted again, not wanting to be left alone. Xian Yingzhi glared at Tang Yuj angrily. How could he be so annoyed? I really want to hit him. Qian Yuman looked at these two childish men helplessly. What happened to them today? Why do they get into quarrels and fights whenever they disagree? I remember that although they didn't get along very well in the past, at least they didn't confront each other very well. What's going on with them today? Did we collectively take the wrong medicine? She looked like it. Okay, did you have fun today? If you're happy, let's call it a day. Yingzhi, just send me here. No need to bother you to send me to the embassy. It's a bit far from the embassy here, so I'll ask Mr. Tang to send me there. I just happened to be on the road with him. Usually castles are not built in the city center, and embassies are in the city center. It takes at least half an hour to drive there and back. Qian Yuman's words immediately made Tang Yuj feel proud and relaxed, and raised his little chin. Did you hear that? Did you hear that? Are you still fighting with me? Lose. Xian Yingzhi dropped his shoulders in disappointment. Originally, he called Xiaoqian Lei today because he first wanted to eat the feast she cooked and secondly because he wanted to have another chance to be alone with her. Unexpectedly, because of Tang Yuj's existence, he would not be able to be alone with her for the first time today. There is no chance. I feel so lost, I feel like the sky is falling. Poor little Yingzhi had no idea that this man and woman had just experienced a huge leap the day before yesterday, and they were no longer hiding like they used to. After what happened the night before yesterday, Tang Yuj was resurrected with full health. Another invincible little strongman with full fighting power. Tang Yuj naturally knew what Qian Yuman was going to do today, and he had already seen through Xian Yingzhi's purpose. Naturally, he followed him life and death, just to prevent them from getting together alone and to prevent his wife from being taken over by this little brat Xian Yingzhi. Cheap. Xian Yingzhi was in a very low mood. He watched Qian Yuman staggeringly as he sat in the car. His cute little mouth kept pouting, clearly expressing to Qian Yuman that he was very unhappy at the moment. He was in a very bad mood and needed to be comforted. Need comfort? Yingzhi, go back quickly, Qian Yuman smiled and waved. Xian Yingzhi nodded, suddenly remembered something, and immediately thrust a red post in his hand into Qian Yuman's arms. Then, remember to come and participate. Before Xian Yingzhi finished speaking, Tang Yuj stepped on the accelerator and sped away, not giving them another chance to speak. Qian Yuman looked at Tang Yuj who was driving with strange eyes. She dragged her chin with one hand and looked at Tang Yuj doubtfully. You are very strange today, Qian Yuman looked at Tang Yuj with interest. Is it strange? It's strange there, nothing happened to him, which was fine. Don't you think you're noisy today? It's extremely noisy, the noisiest ever. Tang Yuj suddenly hit the brakes. Unprepared, Qian Yuman rushed forward. Qian Yuman, who almost hit her forehead, was about to get angry. Tang Yuj, you want to die? What are you doing? Qian Yuman felt her eyes darken. End of this chapter. After the flash marriage, the character collapsed. Author, Daobi in the World. Chapter 970. Chapter 970 Wedding Invitation 8. Tang Yuj suddenly hit the brakes. Unprepared, Qian Yuman rushed forward. Qian Yuman, who almost hit her forehead, was about to get angry. Tang Yuj, you want to die? What are you doing? Qian Yuman felt her eyes go dark, the shadow fell, and at the same time a small mouth fell, blocking Qian Yuman's chattering mouth. The opponent attacks quickly and gets entangled with him quickly. Qian Yuman was stunned for a few seconds, and then she remembered to resist. She hit Tang Yuj twice with both hands, and his hands were held by him. This actually kissed her. This was Qian Yuman's last shred of reason. Under Tang Yuj's superb kissing skills, she unconsciously responded to him. Without her realizing it, her hands hooked around his neck and continued to deepen the kiss. The temperature in the car is getting higher and higher. The men and women in the car are breathing faster and faster, and each other's breathing is getting lighter and thinner. The breath is constantly entwined between them. Seeing that he was getting more and more out of control, Tang Yuj backed away. After Tang Yuj left, Qian Yuman's eyes were confused and she hadn't realized what she and Tang Yuj had just done. The violent breathing became ambiguous sounds, and neither of them spoke, nor dared to look at each other. Just as Qian Yuman slowly regained her consciousness, feeling annoyed that it stopped just like that, Tang Yuj leaned towards her again. Qian Yuman's breathing stagnated, and she didn't dare to take a breath. She thought Tang Yuj was going to continue the kiss, but Tang Yuj bent down, stretched his left hand to her feet, and picked up the red post that Xian Yingzhi had just handed to Qian Yuman. Just now Qian Yuman hurriedly took the invitation from Xian Yingzhi. Before she had time to read it, the invitation fell to the ground during a passionate kiss from Tang Yuj. If Tang Yuj hadn't picked it up, she would have forgotten about the invitation. Damn it, my mood has been affected by this man again. Here you go. Tang Yuj handed the invitation to Qian Yuman and raised his eyebrows at her with a mean smile. He looks a bit handsome, but also a bit annoying. Qian Yuman hummed, smiled, reached out to take the invitation, and looked at the red invitation in her hand carefully. I remember that this was what Xian Yingzhi put into her hand when he left. He pretended to say that he must come, but didn't say what it was, and she didn't take it to heart. The car drove smoothly on the road again, and it was almost time to go to work in the afternoon. Although Tang Yuj wanted to continue to stay with her for a while, he did not want to be beaten and scolded by Qian Yuman, so he could only continue driving. The two of them didn't speak to each other, and the embarrassment in the air was almost overflowing. In order to relieve each other's embarrassment, Qian Yuman chose to use other things to relieve her own embarrassment. Wedding invitation? When Qian Yuman saw the invitation, she was still confused. Why did Xian Yingzhi give her a wedding invitation? Who wants to get married? Could it be that he is a fairy who exists like Prince Charming? Thinking that it might be him, I couldn't help but sigh in my heart, another handsome guy has entered the grave of marriage. Qian Yuman opened the wedding invitation and looked at the place where the bride and groom were written. Groom, Xian Kaiping. Bride, Lining. Ha! Qian Yuman couldn't believe it and once again confirmed who the bride and groom were. After looking at it no less than 5 times, she was sure that the bride was really Lining, a woman who looked exactly like her mother. But, why Lining? Aren't they a couple? You already have a son as old as Xian Yuanxuan. Why? The things that Xian Yingzhi had talked to him before quickly appeared in his mind. End of this chapter.